The restaurant was glowing with lights, chandeliers shining like stars above the polished tables, the sound of laughter and expensive conversations filling the air. Wealthy people came here every evening, dressed in their finest clothes, showing their power with gold watches and loud voices. For them, this place was not just about food. It was about pride, about status, about being seen. Among all this glitter, a young waitress moved quietly between the tables. Her name was Emily. She wore the simple uniform of the restaurant, a white shirt, a black apron, and shoes that were already wearing out. She did not look like the customers, she did not shine like them, but her smile carried a kind of light that came from inside her heart. Emily was only 23. She had dreams once, dreams of studying, of becoming a teacher, but life had been unkind. Her father had fallen sick, her mother worked small cleaning jobs, and Emily had to step forward to keep her family alive. Every morning she worked at a small bakery, and every evening she rushed to this restaurant. She had no time for herself, no time to rest. Yet, she never complained. She believed one day things would change. But on this night, her strength was tested. At a large table near the center of the room, a group of rich customers were already in a playful mood. They laughed loudly, their rings flashing as they raised their glasses, their voices louder than anyone else in the room. Emily walked to their table with her small notepad, ready to take their order. She bowed politely, her voice soft. "Good evening, may I take your order?" One of the men looked at her from head to toe and smirked. "Look at her shoes," he said to his friends. "They look older than my car tires." The table burst into laughter. Emily forced a small smile, pretending she didn't hear. She asked again, "What would you like to have tonight?" Another woman at the table leaned forward and whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Do you think she even knows the difference between red wine and white wine? Poor thing probably drinks tap water at home." Again, the table laughed. Emily felt her cheeks burning. She knew she could not fight back. Not here, not now. Her job was all she had. She swallowed her pain and wrote their order carefully, her hands trembling slightly. As she turned to leave, one of the men snapped his fingers. "Wait, did you wash your hands before coming here? Don't want your poor germs touching our food." More laughter followed. Emily's heart felt heavy, but she bowed again. "Yes, sir," she said softly, and walked away. She moved to the kitchen, hiding near the corner for a moment. She pressed her hand against her chest, breathing slowly. This was not the first time customers mocked her. She had faced this many times before. But somehow, tonight felt harder. Perhaps she was more tired than usual, or perhaps their words cut deeper. She thought of her father at home, coughing in his bed, of her mother waiting for the small money she would bring, and she told herself she must stay strong. Carrying the food back to their table, she kept her eyes down. She placed the dishes carefully, but even then, one man pretended to drop his fork on the ground and said, "Pick it up for me, that's your real job anyway." Emily bent down quietly and picked up the fork, placing it back on the table. She wanted to cry, but she bit her lip and held back the tears. Around the restaurant, a few other customers noticed what was happening, but no one spoke. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to upset the rich table. The waiters and staff also stayed silent, pretending not to hear. Emily felt completely alone in that crowded place. But there was one man, sitting quietly at table 7, who watched everything. He was not dressed like the others. His clothes were simple, his hair a little messy, but his eyes were calm, sharp, and filled with thought. He had not laughed, he had not spoken, he simply watched. Emily did not notice him yet. For her, the night was just another fight for survival. She kept moving from table to table, her back aching, her feet hurting, but she carried on. The voices from the rich table grew louder. They began clapping mockingly when she served them, pretending as if she was part of their entertainment. Emily's hands shook, but still she smiled faintly, because she knew one wrong move could cost her job. Inside, however, she was breaking. Each insult felt like a stone thrown at her soul. She asked herself quietly, why are people so cruel? Why can't they see I am just working to live? Her struggle was not just with the trays she carried, but with the weight in her heart. And as the night went on, the weight grew heavier. Yet somewhere in the same room, the man at table 7 continued to watch, his silence more powerful than the laughter around him. Emily did not know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. The night grew louder inside the restaurant. Glasses clinked, plates rattled, and laughter from the rich customers at the center table echoed like a cruel drumbeat. For them, it was not only dinner, it was a performance, and sadly, Emily the waitress had become their stage. She returned to their table carrying a tray with wine and appetizers. Her hands shook slightly, though she tried to keep them steady. She placed each glass with care, her soft voice saying, "Here you go, sir, here you go, But the cruelty was waiting for her. One of the men leaned back in his chair and said loudly, "Careful, careful. Don't drop it, little bird, or you'll never pay back the cost of this wine." His words made the others laugh. Another woman added, "She probably has never even seen a bottle like this in her life. Look how nervous she is." The group clapped mockingly as if Emily was performing a comedy act. Her face turned red, but she stayed quiet. Her job depended on silence. When she placed the last glass, one man suddenly pushed his chair back, pretending to be shocked. "Oh no, she touched my napkin," he cried dramatically. "Now I need a new one. Who knows where her hands have been?" The table roared with laughter again. Emily bent down and replaced the napkin with quiet hands. She whispered, "I'm sorry, sir." But inside, her heart broke a little more. The cruelty did not stop. They found new ways to humiliate her, as if they were inventing a cruel game. One woman dropped her spoon on purpose and said, "Pick it up, sweetheart. That's your real skill, isn't it? Picking things from the floor." Emily knelt down, picked the spoon, and handed it back politely. Her knees hurt, but her pride hurt even more. She wanted to disappear, but she had to stay strong. The group was not done yet. Another man reached into his pocket, pulled out a few coins, and tossed them onto the floor. The silver coins rolled near Emily's shoes. "Oh look," he said with a wicked smile. "Your tip is running away. Better grab it before it escapes." Everyone laughed again. Emily froze for a second. The coins glimmered at her feet. A storm of emotions fought inside her. Anger, shame, pain. But finally, she bent down, picked up the coins, and placed them back on the table. Her voice cracked softly, "Please don't do this." Her words only made them laugh harder. Around the restaurant, some diners looked uncomfortable. They glanced at the table, then quickly looked away. They were afraid to speak, afraid to stand up to such wealthy people. The staff at the restaurant also ignored the cruelty, pretending to be busy. For them, money spoke louder than dignity. And yet, one pair of eyes at table 7 never left the scene. The man sitting alone, calm and silent, watched everything. His face gave nothing away, but his eyes held a storm. Emily tried to stay focused. She served their food, one dish after another, while the group continued their mockery. When she placed a steak on the table, one man tapped the plate with his fork and said, "You know, if you make one mistake, we can have you fired in a second. People like you are replaceable. There are hundreds waiting outside to take your place." The words pierced her like a knife. Replaceable. Worthless. She forced herself not to cry. Not here, not now. Another woman leaned close to Emily and whispered harshly, "Don't look so sad, dear. This is entertainment for us. At least you are useful in some way." Then she laughed out loud, making sure everyone could hear. Emily stepped back, her hands clutching the tray tightly. Her breathing became heavy, her chest tight. She told herself over and over, "Be strong, Emily. Just a few more hours. Just survive this night." But the cruelty only grew sharper. One of the men suddenly raised his voice and said, "Waitress, come here, dance for us. If you want a bigger tip, show us something funny." His friends cheered. Emily's heart stopped. She shook her head gently. "I can't do that, sir. I'm here to serve food, not." Before she could finish, the man slammed his fist on the table. "Don't talk back. The sound silenced the room for a moment. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly turned away so they would not see. The restaurant's music and chatter soon returned, but inside Emily's world, everything felt dark. She walked away from their table, each step heavy, her spirit bending under the weight of humiliation. Yet even in that darkness, something unexpected was happening. The man at table 7 leaned forward, his eyes following her. He had not spoken yet, but his silence carried more meaning than all the noise in the room. The cruel laughter continued, but soon, very soon, it would be interrupted by a voice no one expected. And that voice would change everything. The laughter from the rich table echoed like thunder, shaking the fragile heart of the young waitress. Every insult they threw at her landed like a stone, but she kept walking, kept smiling weakly, because she had no choice. Her life depended on this job. Yet while the whole restaurant pretended not to see, one man at table 7 noticed everything. He had been there since the evening began, sitting alone by the window. His table was small, only one glass of water, one plate waiting to be filled. He was not dressed like the other customers. While they wore shining suits, sparkling jewelry, and flashing watches, this man wore a simple dark jacket, a plain shirt, and shoes that looked comfortable instead of expensive. To many, he appeared ordinary, someone they might ignore. But there was something about him that could not be ignored. His eyes. His eyes were calm, steady, and sharp, like they had seen much more of life than anyone in that room. From the very first insult, he had been watching. Not with a smile, not with anger on his face, but with a silence so deep that it seemed louder than the laughter filling the air. He watched the waitress bend down to pick up coins from the floor. He saw her wipe her eyes when no one was looking. He noticed the trembling of her hands when she held the tray. Every detail entered his mind like a recording, and each detail cut into his heart. Emily, the waitress, finally reached his table. She stood there for a moment, trying to breathe. She looked at him nervously, afraid he would be just like the others. She forced her voice to sound normal, though it cracked slightly. "Good evening, sir. What would you like to order?" The man lifted his eyes to her face. For the first time that evening, Emily felt something unusual. His gaze did not cut her down, it lifted her. His eyes carried no cruelty, no mockery, only quiet kindness. He spoke softly, his voice calm and deep. "Take your time. Bring me whatever you think is best." Emily froze for a second. She was used to demands, to sharp orders, to loud voices. But this man, he gave her a choice. He trusted her judgment. Nobody ever did that. She nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Thank you." As she walked back toward the kitchen, she realized something strange. The kindness of one sentence from him felt heavier, warmer, than all the cruelty she had faced that night. For just a moment, her back felt straighter, her steps lighter. But the group of rich customers was not finished. They shouted for her again, pulling her back into their storm of mockery. The man at table 7 watched silently as Emily struggled once more. A waiter from another table leaned toward the man and whispered, "Don't mind them, sir. They are regulars. They always behave like that. It's better not to interfere." The man did not answer. He simply nodded politely, but inside, his silence was not agreement. It was patience. He was waiting. Time passed. The laughter grew crueler, the games more humiliating. Each insult built a wall of pain around Emily, but at the same time, it built a fire inside the silent man. The restaurant lights reflected in his eyes as he sat back, observing. He had spent his whole life around wealth, around arrogance, around power. He had seen many people who used money to step on others. But tonight, something about this scene felt different. Perhaps it was the way Emily kept her dignity despite the pain. Perhaps it was the way the whole room stayed silent, afraid of money. Or perhaps it was the reminder that real power is not in mocking but in protecting. When Emily returned with his food, he smiled gently. "Thank you," he said. 2 simple words, but spoken with respect, not pity. Emily's heart warmed for a brief second. Respect. That was all she wanted. She whispered back, "You're welcome." and quickly moved away before the tears in her eyes could be seen. The man cut his food slowly, but his eyes never left the cruel table. He was not a man who spoke quickly. He was a man who measured his words, and when he spoke, people listened. But for now, he chose silence. Because sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. It waits, it studies, and when the time comes, it strikes with precision. The laughter from the rich table grew louder once again. One of them shouted, "Hey, waitress. Maybe you should sit with the poor man at table 7. You two would make a perfect pair." The table burst into laughter, mocking both Emily and the silent man. Emily's face burned with shame. She kept walking, her head down. But the man at table 7 finally lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and set it down with a sound that seemed louder than the laughter. His eyes locked on the group, steady and unshaken. For the first time that night, one of the rich customers felt a chill and stopped laughing. The silent man's moment was coming. The cruelty had gone too far, and soon his voice would rise above them all. A voice they would never forget. The night inside the restaurant had turned into a cruel show. The rich customers laughed louder, their voices filling every corner like sharp knives. The waitress, Emily, kept moving between their table and the kitchen, her steps slow, her shoulders heavy. Every word they spoke against her pressed down like a stone, and she felt her spirit slowly breaking. At first, she thought she could survive it. She had faced insults before. She had swallowed tears before. But tonight, something inside her was weaker, more fragile. Maybe it was the long hours she worked at the bakery in the morning. Maybe it was the worry about her father coughing at home. Or maybe it was just the endless cruelty that refused to stop. She carried another tray toward the mocking table. On it were delicate desserts, chocolate soufflés, shining with sugar, smelling sweet. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to walk steady. She placed one dish after another, her voice soft, "Here you go, sir, here you go." Then one of the men leaned back, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You know, people like her don't belong in places like this. She should be scrubbing floors, not serving us." The table roared with laughter. Another woman added cruelly, "Maybe she should wash our shoes next. That would suit her better." Emily felt her chest tighten. She tried to keep calm, but her vision blurred. Her throat ached as if she had swallowed fire. She reached the last customer, but her shaking hands betrayed her. The tray slipped slightly, the dessert almost falling. Gasps filled the air. Emily managed to place it down, but the man at the end of the table smirked. "You see?" he shouted. "Clumsy hands. This is why poor people should never touch expensive things." The laughter exploded again. Emily stood frozen, her fingers gripping the empty tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wanted to scream, to tell them she was human, to tell them she had feelings, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to leave, but one of the women leaned forward and whispered harshly, "Your family must be so proud of you. Serving tables like a beggar." That was the moment. Emily's tray slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed louder than the laughter. Everyone turned to look. Her shoulders shook, her lips trembled, and for the first time that night, she could not hold it in. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She tried to wipe them quickly, but they would not stop. She bowed her head and turned away, walking as fast as she could, her heart racing like a bird trying to escape a cage. The restaurant fell into a strange silence. For a second, even the rich table stopped laughing. Some customers looked away in shame. Others whispered softly, but no one moved to help. No one, except the man at table 7. He had watched silently all evening, his calm eyes taking in every detail, his heart growing heavier with each insult. But now, as Emily broke down, something inside him shifted. He placed his fork on the table with a soft sound. He wiped his mouth gently with the napkin. And then, with slow, steady movements, he stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor cut through the silence. Every head in the restaurant turned. The rich customers looked at him with surprise, then confusion. Who was this man? Why was he standing up? Emily froze mid-step, her tear-streaked face turning slightly toward him. She had no idea why he was moving, no idea what was about to happen. The man stood tall, his eyes fixed on the cruel table. His presence alone seemed to silence the laughter that was about to rise again. There was something in his posture, calm yet powerful, that made even the arrogant group pause. He did not shout. He did not rush. He simply looked at them with eyes that carried a weight stronger than gold. In that moment, the atmosphere of the entire restaurant changed. The air felt heavier, the laughter died on lips, and even the chandeliers seemed to shine less brightly. Emily held her breath. She felt something strange. Hope. The man at table 7 was no longer just a silent customer. He was a storm about to break. And the rich customers, who thought they ruled the room with their money, were about to learn that true power does not laugh at the weak. True power stands up for them. The breaking point had arrived. And nothing in that restaurant would be the same again. The restaurant stood frozen. The sound of clinking glasses, the hum of conversation, even the laughter, all of it had fallen silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward table 7, where the quiet man had finally risen to his feet. Emily stood near the corner, her tears still fresh, her tray abandoned on the floor. She looked at him through blurred eyes, confused, frightened, yet strangely comforted. For reasons she could not explain, she felt safer now than she had all evening. The rich customers shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. They were used to mocking without consequence, used to silencing people with money and arrogance. But the way this man stood, calm, steady, unshaken, made them uneasy. He took one slow step forward, then another. The sound of his shoes against the polished floor seemed to echo through the entire restaurant. When he finally stopped, he was only a few steps away from their table. His voice came at last. Deep, calm, but carrying weight like thunder. "Tell me," he said softly, "what makes you laugh?" The question hung in the air like a blade. The customers glanced at each other nervously. One man forced a chuckle. "We're only having fun. Don't take it so seriously." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Fun? You call humiliating a woman fun? You call breaking someone's spirit entertainment?" The group shifted again. Some looked down, others smirked nervously. Another man tried to laugh it off. "She's just a waitress. She should be used to it." The man's voice sharpened, though still steady. "Just a waitress? Do you think her job makes her less human than you? Do you think your money gives you the right to crush dignity?" The words cut through the room like lightning. Diners at nearby tables froze, their forks halfway to their mouths. The staff peeked out from the kitchen, wide-eyed. The cruel group tried to recover their arrogance. A woman sneered, "Who are you to lecture us? You're just another customer." The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Another customer? Perhaps. But one thing is certain, I will not sit here and watch cruelty wear a crown." Emily's breath caught. She had never heard anyone speak like that. Calm yet unshakable, gentle yet powerful. The man turned slightly, his gaze softening as it fell on her. "You don't deserve their words," he said to her in a voice only she could truly feel. "You don't deserve their cruelty. You deserve respect." Her tears fell faster, but this time they were not tears of shame. They were tears of relief. For the first time that night, she felt seen. She felt human again. The group at the table grew restless. Their confidence cracked. One of the men stood and snapped, "You have no right to interfere. Sit down before you embarrass yourself." The man at table 7 stepped closer. He leaned slightly toward them, his calmness now heavy with authority. "No right? Every person in this room has the right to stand against cruelty. You laughed at her as if she were an object. You mocked her as if her pain was a toy. But dignity is not something you can buy or destroy." The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The chandeliers above flickered slightly, as if even the lights listened. The man's voice lowered, yet it carried further than any shout. "Remember this. Money can buy you food, wine, even power. But it cannot buy you respect. And it cannot buy you the right to humiliate another soul." His words landed like stones in water, sending ripples across the room. For the first time that evening, the arrogant group had no laughter left. Their smirks disappeared. Their eyes darted nervously between each other. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had never dreamed anyone would defend her. Not like this, not in front of everyone. The silent man had become the voice of justice. And though no one in the restaurant knew it yet, this was only the beginning. For soon, his true identity would be revealed, and the weight of his words would crush the arrogance that had poisoned the air. But at this moment, his calm, steady voice was enough. It was a sword sharper than cruelty, a shield stronger than silence. The billionaire had spoken, and the world around him had no choice but to listen. The air inside the restaurant was heavy. No laughter, no clinking of glasses, no idle chatter. Only silence. Silence born from the calm but sharp words of the man from table 7. The rich customers sat frozen, their arrogance cracked, their confidence trembling. They had mocked the waitress for fun, but now they found themselves the target of a quiet storm. Emily stood near the corner, her tray forgotten, her eyes wide with shock. She had never expected anyone, let alone a stranger, to defend her like this. Every word he spoke had felt like a shield placed between her and her tormentors. For the first time that night, she could breathe. But the room had not yet seen the full truth of who this man was. One of the arrogant men at the table finally found his voice. He sneered, trying to recover his pride. Enough of this nonsense. Who do you think you are, standing here, talking to us like that? Do you even know who we are? We spend more in one evening than you earn in a year. The man from table 7 didn't flinch. His eyes remained steady, his voice calm. I don't care who you are. Titles and money do not impress me. I care about how you treat people. And tonight, you have shown nothing but cruelty. Gasps whispered through the room. The diners at other tables watched in awe, sensing something deeper about this man. The arrogant woman at the table leaned forward, her eyes sharp. You talk big, but you're just another poor man pretending to be noble. If you had any power, you wouldn't be sitting alone at that small table. Her words were meant to cut, but they fell flat. Because at that moment, the restaurant manager hurried out from the back, his face pale, his hands trembling. He rushed straight toward table 7 and stopped with a bow. Mr. Alexander, the manager said breathlessly, we didn't know you were here tonight. The room gasped again. Whispers spread like fire. Mr. Alexander? Could it be? The rich customers froze. Their faces turned pale as the truth dawned on them. The man they had mocked, the man they had laughed at only moments ago. This was not just a stranger. This was Alexander Grant, one of the most powerful billionaires in the city, owner of vast companies. A man whose name appeared in newspapers, whose decisions could move markets. And more than that, whispers spread louder now. He was also a silent partner in this very restaurant. The color drained from the arrogant group's faces. Their laughter was gone, their confidence shattered. The man, no, the billionaire, stood tall, his calm eyes never leaving them. His voice was steady, but sharper now, like steel wrapped in velvet. You mocked her as if she were nothing. But let me tell you this, every person who works here is under my care. Every waiter, every waitress, every cook. You mocked her, but in truth, you mocked me. The words struck like thunder. The woman who had sneered at him tried to speak, but her voice cracked. We didn't know. Alexander's gaze hardened. And that is the problem. You think respect should only be given when someone is rich, when someone is powerful. But true respect is shown when you give it to those who cannot repay you. And tonight, you failed that test. The entire restaurant seemed to lean forward, hanging on his every word. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding. She could not believe what she was hearing. The man who had stood up for her was not only kind, he was powerful beyond imagination. Alexander turned slightly, his eyes softening as he looked at her. For the first time in her life, Emily felt like she mattered, not as a waitress, not as a servant, but as a person. He turned back to the group, his voice like a final verdict. This restaurant does not welcome cruelty. Your membership here is cancelled, effective immediately. Leave. Now. The group was stunned. Their mouths opened, but no words came. Slowly, one by one, they pushed back their chairs. The sound of scraping wood against the floor echoed through the room. Heads hung low, faces burning with shame, they walked out. The other diners watched in silence, some with awe, some with hidden smiles. A few even began to clap softly, the sound growing louder, filling the room. Emily stood with tears streaming down her face, not of pain this time, but of relief, of gratitude. Alexander's voice, now gentle again, broke through the applause. No one should ever feel small for doing honest work. Your dignity, he said, looking at Emily, is worth more than their gold. The words wrapped around her like a blanket. She pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed, unable to speak. The reveal was complete. The man who had sat silently at table 7, the man who had spoken with calm authority, was not just any man. He was a billionaire, a protector, a reminder that true power is not in money, but in standing up for what is right. The restaurant was no longer the same. A place once filled with arrogant laughter now carried the heavy silence of shame. The rich customers who had mocked the waitress were already walking toward the exit, their heads lowered, their pride shattered. The applause from other diners still echoed softly, like waves against the shore. At the center of it all stood Alexander Grant, the billionaire who had risen from table 7. His presence filled the room, not with loudness, not with force, but with the quiet strength of truth. Emily stood near the corner, her eyes fixed on him. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Moments ago, she had been the target of endless cruelty. Now, the most powerful man in the room had stood for her, spoken for her, and silenced her tormentors. But Alexander was not finished. He turned slowly, facing the entire restaurant. His calm eyes moved from table to table, settling on the staff, the diners, the waiters who had stayed silent out of fear. His voice rose once more, deep, calm, but carrying a weight that made everyone listen. "Let tonight be remembered," he began. "Because this is not only about one waitress. This is about all of us. Too often, we see cruelty and pretend not to notice. Too often, we allow the rich, the loud, the proud, to crush the dignity of those who serve quietly. And too often, we stay silent, thinking it is not our fight." The room was still. No fork moved, no glass clinked. Every word landed like a stone in still water. Alexander continued, his gaze firm. "Respect is not a gift for the rich. Respect is a right for every human being. The moment we laugh at another person's struggle, we lose our own humanity." Emily's heart pounded. She felt every word like it was written directly for her. Yet she knew it was for everyone in that room. The billionaire turned his attention to the staff. To the waiters, the cooks, the cleaners, remember this. Your work has value. Do not let anyone make you feel small. You carry the weight of this place on your shoulders. Without you, there is no restaurant, no service, no joy. Tears welled in Emily's eyes again, but this time they were warm, not heavy. For the first time, someone powerful had spoken truth in her defense. Alexander's voice grew stronger, sharper now. "And to those who mock tonight, let this be a lesson. You may have money, but money cannot hide cruelty. You may have power, but power used to crush the weak is nothing but cowardice. True greatness," he paused, letting the words sink deep, "is shown in kindness." The diners nodded silently, some bowing their heads in shame for their own silence. Others felt a strange fire inside them, realizing they too should have spoken earlier. The manager stepped forward nervously, his hands clasped. "Mr. Alexander, we are honored that you spoke tonight. Your words will not be forgotten." Alexander nodded slightly, but his eyes returned to Emily. She stood with her back straight now, her tears drying, her heart slowly lifting. He spoke directly to her, but loud enough for all to hear. "You are not weak. You are not small. You stood here with dignity, even when they tried to take it away. That strength is greater than their laughter." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, unable to stop the sob that escaped. But this time, it was not a sob of pain. It was of gratitude, of release, of healing. Applause began again, stronger than before. First a few claps, then more, until the entire restaurant was filled with the sound of hands coming together. It was not just for Alexander. It was for Emily, for her struggle, for her silent strength that had finally been seen. The arrogant group had already left, their shame trailing behind them like shadows. They would never forget this night, and neither would anyone else in that room. Alexander raised his hand gently, and the applause softened. He gave one final sentence, simple but unforgettable. "Never forget," he said, his eyes sweeping across the room. "The way you treat those who serve you defines who you truly are." Those words sank into every heart, branding themselves like fire. Emily stood taller now. She was still a waitress, still dressed in her plain uniform, but tonight she felt something new. She felt respected. She felt seen. Justice had been served, not with shouting, not with anger, but with truth spoken in public. And from that moment, the restaurant was no longer just a place for food and wealth. It had become a place where dignity was defended, where kindness had triumphed over cruelty. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed in the air like a sweet fragrance. The restaurant had witnessed something unforgettable. Cruel laughter had been silenced, arrogance had been defeated, and respect had been restored. Emily stood motionless, her heart beating fast, her eyes still wet. She had started this night feeling invisible, humiliated, and broken. But now, in front of everyone, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: dignity. Alexander Grant, the billionaire from Table 7, stepped closer to her. The sound of his shoes against the polished floor was calm, steady, almost comforting. He stopped just a few feet away, lowering his voice so only she and those nearest could hear. "You did not deserve their cruelty," he said gently. "You carried yourself with more strength than they ever could. You should be proud of yourself." Emily pressed her trembling hands together. She wanted to thank him, but words would not come. All she managed was a whisper, "Thank you, sir." Alexander smiled softly. "Don't thank me. Respect is not a gift, it's your right." Then, to the surprise of everyone, he reached into his pocket and placed a folded envelope on her tray. She looked at it with confusion, shaking her head. "Sir, I can't accept this." But Alexander spoke firmly, yet kindly. "This is not charity. This is appreciation. Use it for your dreams, not just for survival." Emily's lips trembled. Dreams. It had been so long since she thought about her dreams. Life had forced her to forget them. But tonight, one stranger, no, one protector, reminded her that she was allowed to dream again. She held the envelope carefully, as if it were made of glass. The diners around them began to rise from their seats, clapping once more, some with tears in their eyes. They were not only clapping for Alexander, they were clapping for Emily, for her courage, for her patience, for her quiet dignity that had survived the storm. The manager came forward, bowing again. "Mr. Alexander, your words tonight will be remembered. You have taught us all a lesson." Alexander shook his head slightly. "The lesson is not mine. It belongs to her." He gestured toward Emily. "She stood through cruelty with grace. That is true strength." Emily's tears spilled again, but this time they were not heavy. They were light, like rain after a long drought. For the first time in many nights, she smiled, a real smile, small but shining. As the evening ended, the restaurant slowly returned to normal, but it no longer felt the same. The air carried a new weight, not of arrogance, but of respect. Diners spoke more softly. Waiters walked with a little more pride. Even the chandeliers seemed to glow warmer. Emily gathered her things after her shift, stepping out into the quiet night. The streets were calm, the cool air brushing against her face. She held the envelope close, not for the money inside, but for what it symbolized: hope. For years she had worked only to survive, forgetting what it felt like to be valued. But tonight reminded her that dignity cannot be stolen, that kindness can appear when least expected, and that even in the darkest moments, someone might rise to defend what is right. She walked slowly, her tired feet no longer heavy, her heart no longer empty. She thought about her father at home, her mother working endless hours. She thought about how, maybe one day soon, she could continue her studies, follow her dream of becoming a teacher. And somewhere in the distance, she imagined Table 7, empty now, but forever alive in her memory. Not just a table, but a symbol. A reminder that one person's voice can change everything. The story of that night spread quickly. Diners told their friends, who told others, until the tale of the billionaire at Table 7 became known far beyond the restaurant's walls. It was not just a story about wealth. It was a story about respect, about courage, about standing for what is right. For Emily, it was more than a story. It was the night her life changed.